All right, I'm making a video today on how I achieve such high power levels and how it's sustainable for these engines. So, we'll just do the generalities of a 600 to 1,000 horsepower build and what's required. So, when my cars are like between 600 and 700 horsepower, I can get away with a factory radiator. However, I'm going to put a Mishimoto thermostat in it, and I'm going to run a Laminova water to oil cooler on this thing. And then I'm going to run a thermostatic sandwich plate. I see a lot of guys with cheap plates. They have to be thermostatic. Okay, so that'll essentially control them 600 to 700 horsepower. Now we're going to go into 700 to 800 horsepower. So when you get to the 700 horsepower range, you really need to have a big boy aluminum radiator. I like the CSF. Mishimoto's just fine. I think the CSF is better quality. Of course, I'm sure it's more expensive. But so what I do is I run a CSF radiator. I run thermostatic sandwich plate. I run a water to oil cooler over there. Okay. And like I said, the thermostat, and that'll hold that. So when I start getting into 800 and above, I'm going to run all of those things, and then I'm going to run like a set rab or a GTR style oil cooler over here. So right when I get to that 800 horsepower threshold, I'm going to have a very big cooler. So now you're thinking like, how is he doing it? So the reason that these engines are lasting and how all of this is working is fluid capacity and exchange. Okay, so exchange temperatures and fluid capacity. So when I run that sandwich plate over there, and then I run the Laminova or a Mocha or whatever you want to run as far as water to air cooling, and then I run this big boy, 28 plus row capacity oil cooler in here, I have so much more oil capacity. Now, add the sandwich plate in there on the bottom of the oil pan, probably gives you a half a quart. Then I got another quart over here. Then I get another half quart through my lines. You see where I'm going with this? The more oil that you can get through this whole system to exchange is the less potentiality of anything ever getting hot. If you can keep these engines from ever getting hot, they'll work perfectly and they'll make very high power numbers for a very long time. Same thing goes for the engine coolant. I want to keep that engine cool constantly. So now we're going to talk about turbochargers. So I hear all these guys talking about R30. I don't mess with R35 factory turbochargers. If I did, I might mess with some Nismos, but that's not going to give me the power that I want. The boost levels that I have to use to get the power that I want make my AITs too high. So I run like basically minimum of 7163s, big single 70 millimeter, and then you're going to add an intercooler with a core like that. So you keep those AITs down, keep the engine cool, keep the oil cool. Now, when you start getting into the 900 plus, you might want to add a fan on that oil cooler and a thermostatic switch, but that would be about it, and that'll regulate up to 1,000 horsepower. And just as a side note, I'm talking about thermostatic sandwich plates and switches and stuff like that. Think about this, the concept. You want your engine oil to come up to temperature as quickly as possible, and you want it to stay constantly regulated at that. You don't want your engine oil to be too cold, because we know what happens there. So, it's just something to think about. When I see guys that are running thermostatic or non-thermostatic sandwich plates and big oil coolers and stuff, it's like you're really doing your engine a disservice, because it's not operating at the correct oil temperatures. Another thing too is I don't see guys with independent oil pressure and oil temperature gauges, which I think are critical. It's like, these engines need to come up to the right exact temperature, they need to have the right pressures, and then you can get on with things. Another thing too that I do on the 900 to 1,000 horsepower builds is I normally will run a pretty big exchange pump in the back, and I run it off of the turbochargers. So when you have a scavenger pump on these things, you can totally reduce the potentiality of backing up your turbochargers and filling up the cartridge and blowing out the seals. So scavenger pumps are good. But the other thing to think about when you're running a scavenger pump is that you're going to have, two pretty long lines, and then you're going to have the pump itself. So, and then also too a wide distribution block if you're twin. but that's extra fluid capacity. It seems like, you know, if I do that setup on one of these, I can get another quart in there. So, you know, like I said, the more oil, the volume that you can get running through this. Oh, and then also too, the scavenger pump will constantly circulate the oil too. So I like that. But that's just something else that I wanted to hit on when you're trying to make that kind of power with these, you know. But, you know, for most intensive purposes, most guys, you can get away with a nice Mishimoto radiator, a thermostat, and then a side-mounted cooler off of a thermostatic switch. You know, a lot of times I'm running the Laminova inline on the radiator hose, and a lot of people would be like, "Oh, it's overkill," and it's like, no, I need to come up to temperature and then sustain it. So just things to think about, guys.